We've received a package in the mail. And it feels kind of heavy. I don't know. What do you think it is?
I don't know. Evidently. Oh, man.
It's a box inside of a box, man.
He stuck us with a bunch of pink packing nuts. Oh, man. Vicky's going to have a fit.
Fuck. June will have fun. He's probably tired of his... Oh, boy.
This is going to be bad.
Oh, my gosh.
Ooh. Purge kit. It is a fluffy. Ooh. Damn, John's hooking me up. Oh. Let's see what else is in here. What is in here? Uh-oh. Oh, dude. Check that out.
Sweet.
Check that out.
Stickers for days.
Stickers for days. Hey. Man, we got a couple t-shirts. Ah! That's for you!
Will you pull the damn intake out already?
We don't know for sure what he sent. Oh boy. God! Lord have mercy. Would you look at that? In all its beauty. Dude, he even powder coated the bottom. Alright guys, welcome to the Street Racing Channel Garage, where today we will be working on this. My mostly stock original 1971 Chevy Nova. This car's been in the family for years. It's always been a street car or a bracket car, and we're going to swap out an intake manifold today. We've got a brand new intake manifold, an Edelbrock Super Victor that we purchased from John Molina. This is a Super Victor Edelbrock intake with an Induction Solutions direct port nitrous system. We've also got a NOS cheater plate. This intake manifold is set up for 4150 flange. As you can see, it's got a 4150 carburetor on it. It is a 1050 main body. This was the carburetor that I originally built for the NOS S10. It was on the truck for a long time. HVH 2-inch super sucker is what they call it, carburetor spacer. The carburetor spacer on this particular intake manifold, the way we run it, helps with part throttle and off idle cruise when street driving. It provides a little bit stronger booster signal to the main body here. It's a 1050 main body, so it's pretty large for 4150. It's just a proven combination that we worked on with the truck. It worked out really well. We drove the truck everywhere, had very good street manners. So we're going to use what we learned on the NOS S10 and put it to good use now in the Nova. Pulling the distributor out of it. We'll get the distributor out and We've already drained the antifreeze lower than the intake manifold gasket surfaces, so we should have the coolant level low enough it won't leak any antifreeze into the lifter valley when we pull the intake off. Disconnected the distributor. We've got a coolant sensor here we've got to remove, and we've got a wire for the alternator that runs through the intake. We'll have to remove that. Go ahead and make some disconnections here on the electrical system. To work on the alternator wire, go ahead and disconnect the battery here. There we go. That way we don't shoot any sparks. Battery disconnected. This is the charging wire that goes to the alternator. We've got the battery disconnected, so it shouldn't throw any sparks at me as I pull it out. Lay it back here out of the way. Go ahead and pull the distributor out. Use my distributor wrench here. Distributor right up out of it. Notice that this distributor hold down clamp is ancient. This is an original GM clamp from probably back in the 50s or 60s. It's something that we rescued from my dad's stash last year. When we started putting this thing back together, we couldn't find the distributor clamp. That's an old wire clamp from back in the 50s. We're going to replace that with something a little bit better. We've got a Jegs billet aluminum hold down bracket that we're going to use. We don't want to risk the distributor turning using that.
How many 200 shots do you think it'll take before the old stock 400 splits in half?
Well, it depends on the tune. It'll last. I mean, it's one of those things where we're not looking to go prep track racing with this. We're not going to be slamming it right out of the hole and working it really hard like that. You know, we're looking to do back into the track, bare asphalt, really bad surface. Do a little street racing with it where you're not really able to put it all down. It's one of those things where we're not looking to really hammer this thing really hard out of the hole. You know, we're looking to maybe spray in high gear, maybe let it leave on the plate. You know, I've got the plate jetted for 125 shot. If we go to Katy Dragway, we run at Midnight Madness, maybe let it leave on 125, and if it'll take it, throw 200 on it on the button, on the fogger. So we're not really looking to throw a whole lot at it. Intake bolts out, double check. All the intake bolts are out. We're ready to lift the intake off. We'll take a screwdriver and stick it down in there, pop it loose. Go. Okay, so pull it off. Had been using is an old strip dominator intake. It's made by Holley. Probably bought this in 2000, 2001 actually. It's been a very good intake. It's a very, very high quality casting, and it's had a little bit of cleanup work to gasket match it, but nothing serious. Really nice little intake. It works really good on 400s down to a 283. Got the intake off. Intake gaskets all look good. They didn't move around on us. Might actually just go ahead and reuse those. As you can see, it's got bullet lifters in it, solid roller lifters. Those lifters were in it when we bought it from Ricky Brewer, or when Billy bought it from Ricky. Unfortunately, without removing those gaskets, I can't really show you how thin the intake manifold flange is down here at the bottom. But there's, I mean, you can see how much of my finger is going up behind the gasket. It's close to 1/8 of an inch. So it's critical when you've got heads that have been milled this far to use silicone all the way around these gaskets, especially at the bottom, just a slight bit, which that's how I put them on, so that's probably why the gaskets have stayed so good. We'll probably be able to reuse them. These are Felpro 1206 gaskets, but these heads have been milled quite a bit. I'd say probably 40 thousandths of an inch. So let's just say they've got a pretty small chamber. I think originally they were 67 cc's. They're probably down around 64, 63, maybe smaller than that. I don't know. They're pretty small. Here, and peel off excess silicone that's still stuck to the block. Take a little brake clean on a rag. Clean these gaskets up real nice. What we'll probably do is just put a light coat of silicone on top of gaskets, since we're going to reuse these. I've got brand new ones laying right there, but these are in such good shape there's no sense in taking them off. So we'll clean these up real good with some brake cleaner, rag, and put a light coat of silicone on top of them, and they should seal to the intake just fine. So we're just about to set the new intake on. Now I've got it set up here on the bench. I've already plumbed everything and went through all the fittings, put thread sealant on all the fittings. Just had it mocked up here. We're going to go ahead and take the carburetor off, as well as the spacer, the HVH spacer. And the reason I'm doing that is so that when we set the intake down on the car, or down on the heads here in just a minute, I just want to check the alignment of the intake manifold runners to the heads, and I'll need to have all this stuff removed in order to do that. So before we put silicone down, and before we get ready to bolt this thing down permanently, we're just going to test fit it dry without any silicone on the gaskets. So let's do that now. Okay, so the best we go ahead and remove the purge line down on there. Let's see how it fits. Now, it's a good thing I did, because I've already got trouble with wires trying to get underneath the intake manifold. So this is just a dry run, if you want to call it that, just to see what we're going to have trouble with. And I already see we've got a little trouble here with the nitrous lines hitting the valve cover, so that'll have to be addressed. Since we've got some nitrous lines here that are hitting the valve covers, they're not allowing the intake to drop down all the way. We're going to take the intake back off, set it on the bench, rotate these two nitrous solenoids down here, and allow the lines to come out in a different angle and get them up off the valve covers. So let's do that now. Those are tight anyway. What we want to do is rotate these if possible. So we'll have to get a couple new lines made. These are going to be way too long that way. There, now it's sitting right down in there where it needs to be. We've rotated our two nitrous solenoids on the fogger so that the ports will come out above the fogger nozzles instead of underneath of them. I've gone ahead and removed these fittings because it was plumbed with -6 lines, to the solenoids, and we don't need that. Dash 4 would be plenty for what we're doing. So I think I'm going to replumb these with dash 4 lines to give us a little bit more room and make things a little bit more convenient back here.
The 6s were too long with
yeah, the
clocked that way.
The 6s were way too long anyway. So looks like the intake's setting down on there pretty good. I'll check the alignment down through the intake runners, and that looks perfect. So we've decided that probably better off to remove the nitrous lines and solenoids in order to get these intake bolts. So luckily we haven't pre-wired any of this. Still able to take it apart. John did a really nice job bending all these nitrous lines. They're just absolutely perfect the way they fit. I'm going to run a bead across each end of the intake valley. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely want to make sure you get enough to seal it. Get up on each end there. Extra on the corners. Alright, so we'll just put a few little dabs here on the intake gaskets. We'll smear that on with our fingers. I'm a real big fan of this piece of shit stuff. A few little dabs here and there, just smear it around with our finger as needed. I don't normally do this, but since we're reusing these, I just want to make sure that it gets sealed up good. Something's wrong. It's getting held up here in the back. There we go. Set it right down on the silicone. Check out your intake bolt holes. They all look like they're lining up good. Intake runners are lining up good. All the holes look like they're lined up really nice. So it's time to snug it down. Brand new set of stainless steel ARP intake manifold bolts. These are actually labeled as header bolts. So they're a little bit longer, but I wanted to make sure we had plenty of thread engagement. And these came with these really nice stainless steel washers, which are important to use on this intake because the intake manifold bolt holes are slotted. So you definitely want to use washers on the intake bolts. Tightening down the intake, we've got all of our new ARP fasteners in, brand new ARP bolts with washers. These use a 5/16 hex head, so we use a 5/16 ratchet wrench to get these center ones in. Now, I always start in the center. The center two bolts on each side. On a small block Chevy, I tighten up the centers first, and then work your way out on each side. That's just my personal preference. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I've always done it. The idea is to clamp the intake in the center first and then work your way out. It's important when you buy a nice intake manifold like this to use ARP or a good quality fastener. These intakes can be difficult to get a standard bolt down along the coolant passages and the intake runners. So believe me, it's well worth the money. If you buy a new intake manifold like this, if you're putting one on for the first time, go ahead and order you a set of good ARP intake bolts. Got the intake bolted down, and I don't know if you can see that, but it squished the silicone out good on each end. That means we've got a good strong seal. That'll set up nice. So while we were at Jegs the other day, I decided that I'm kind of tired of looking at these 1990s valve covers. I've always had chrome Chevrolet valve covers on this thing. It's just old school. You know, I grew up in the 90s, and that was the big thing back in the 90s, was chrome valve covers. It's been a big thing for years, but even though it's got Brodix heads, the Brodix valve covers that they sell at Jegs are just very expensive, and they're uglier than a mud fence, in my opinion. So we bought a new set of valve covers from Airflow Research. I think eventually one of these days I'll probably have a set of AFR heads on this thing anyway, so not trying to false advertise, but AFR valve covers are just absolutely beautiful. We've had them on the S10 for a long time, so I'm going to put them on this too so that they match. This engine's got track 1 heads, Brodix track 1 heads. It's got just standard Harlan Sharp roller rockers, a cheap set of Proform stud girdles. The reason it's got cheap Proform stud girdles is I needed some, and that's the only thing Jegs had in stock that day. But they've worked out okay. I don't have any complaints with them. I'm not fancy about the color, but it is what it is. Nobody can see them anyway.
This life's not through me. I tried to find the bottom of this bottle tonight.
The only thing we've got left to do is we got to do something with these nitrous lines. We had to reroute them, and I've got to shorten the lines that we got with the kit. So I've got to go back to Jegs and get some fittings and some -6 nitrous hose, and we've got to straighten that up. But outside of that, I think everything's tight. I think everything's ready to start it. We've got water in the radiator. I think it should be ready to start. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Sounds good. I think we're ready to head back to Jegs and get whatever we need to fix up that nitrous solenoid. And get our purge valve line. We've got to get it run up here underneath the cowl somehow. We've got to get that done yet. But outside of that, it sounds good. I think we're in good shape.